Hello guys, welcome to my channel. Welcome to another video. Disclaimer: none of the event mentioned are true. No idol is being harmed in the video, and any idol doesn't have any type of negative role. So please don't take it hurt. This is a pure fiction story. Now let's start our second part of video. Don't insult my intelligence. I see your family's blood in your veins, and that is enough. You are guilty by the name you carry. Her lips quivered, her heart breaking under the weight of his hurt. Jungkook, I love you. I married you with nothing but love in my heart. Why would I ruin that? He sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. Love? Don't soil that word in front of me. Whatever you feel, it's meaningless now. My father is dead. His dreams are blurred, and your family is thriving on the ashes. No amount of your pleading will erase that. You are a reminder of every wound, Minnie, and I will never forgive you. The room spun around her as tears blurred her vision. She wanted to scream, to beg, to shake him until he believed her. But his eyes, those dark, cold eyes, told her nothing she said would pierce through his anger. I will not leave, she whispered through her sobs. Even if you hate me, even if you punish me, I will stay. One day you will know the truth. Jungkook's lips curled into a bitter smile. Stay then. Stay and suffer. Every day you spend in this house will be a reminder of your family's sin. And when you cry yourself to sleep, remember, it was my choice to make you break. When she returned to her lonely room, the silence there was so much unbearable for Minnie. The moonlight poured through the window, washing her face in silver as her tears spilled freely. She clutched her pillow, burying her sobs in the fabric so the servants wouldn't hear. Every memory of his smile before the wedding stabbed at her like a cruel joke. She had dreamed of their wedding night filled with whispers of love, with his hands holding hers. Instead, she had been thrown into a nightmare where the man she adored looked at her as though she were poison. Her chest ached with every breath, and though she told herself she would stay strong, her body shook violently with grief. The pillow beneath her was damp by dawn, yet her tears didn't stop. Across the hall, Jungkook sat in a dimly lit study, another glass of whiskey in hand. The alcohol burned down his throat, but it was not enough to numb the ache in his heart, in his chest. His thoughts wandered to his father, the man who had built an empire with blood and sweat, who had died broken hearted when betrayal stripped him of everything. Jungkook remembered the night his father coughed into silence, the shadow under his eyes, the trembling hands that tried to hide their weakness. The memory twisted into rage, and he poured himself another drink. But beneath the anger, another image haunted him. Minnie's cheerful eyes, her trembling voice, begging him to believe her. He clenched his jaw and forced the thought away. She's a liar, he told himself. She was to be. Otherwise, what am punishing her fur. He drowned himself in whiskey until the early hours. His body slumped in exhaustion, his mind still at war. Morning came with a cruel brightness, the sunlight spilling into the dining room as the household gathered. The servants lined the walls, attentive and silent. Minnie entered quietly, her face pale, her eyes swollen from the night before. She moved with grace despite her exhaustion, her hand steady as she poured tea into Jungkook's cup. She prayed silently for small kindness, even if it was just his silence. But Jungkook had other intentions. As she placed the cup before him, he glanced at it briefly before pushing it away with a flick of his wrist. "I told you before," he said coldly, his voice carrying across the room. "I don't drink anything touched by traitors." The servant stiffened, exchanging uneasy glances. Minnie's hand froze, the teapot trembling slightly in her grip. Heart flooded, heat flooded her cheeks, humiliation burning like fire under her skin. "Jungkook," she whispered, her voice barely audible. He leaned back in his chair, his tone dripping with disdain. "What is it? Do you want me to thank you for poisoning me slowly? Or should I admire you? Acting skills. Either way. Save your efforts. I don't need them." Laughter did not erupt. No one dared. The servants stood rigid, their eyes downcast. But the silence was worse. It was as though the walls themselves had heard her disgrace. Minnie lowered her gaze, fighting back tears. She wanted to vanish, to sink into the ground and escape the humiliation pressing against her chest. But she held herself still, her dignity hanging by a thread. Jungkook, satisfied with the crack in her composure, picked up the cup again, not to drink, but to shove it toward one of the servants. "Bring me another, one that hasn't been tainted." The servant sculled away, and Minnie stepped back, her heart splintering with each breath. The breakfast table, once imagined as a place of shared laughter and warmth, had become a battlefield where her dignity was trampled underfoot. And yet she endured. She sat quietly, swallowing her pain, reminding herself again and again, "One day he will know the truth. One day he will see me." But Jungkook planted her rage, only saw the ghost of betrayal in her every action. For him, her endurance was not loyalty, but proof of her desultful patience, and so his cruelty deepened, blinding him both in a cycle of love, hate, and suffering. Neither could escape. The whispers began softly, like shadows in the corridor of the mansion, but they soon spread into every corner of Jungkook's world. Servant whispered in hushed tones, exchanged knowing glances, and distant relative raised eyebrows behind closed doors. The perfect marriage that had been celebrated with grandeur only weeks ago was already the subject of cruel gossip. They say the young master doesn't even share a room with his bride. I heard he speaks to her like she's a servant. What a pity, she is so gentle, yet unloved. Minnie heard every word, though they were never spoken directly to her. The servants were careful, lowering their voice when she entered, but she caught fragments, enough to carve wound deeper than any blade. Her cheeks would burn, her eyes sting, and yet she smiled faintly, pretending she hadn't heard. She endured because she always endured. But in the silence of her lonely room, the rumors echoed louder, taunting her with the truth she could not deny. Her marriage was crumbling, and everyone could see it. Jungkook remained indifferent. If he heard the whispers, he gave no sign. To him, the growing distance was deliberate, a wall he had built with his own hands. Every glance he withheld, every insult he delivered was a brick in that fortress. But to Minhee, each day without his kindness was another thread unraveling from the fabric of her heart. The nights were the hardest. She would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, remembering the promises she had once imagined for herself. She recalled the tender glances before marriage, the fleeting moments when she believed he might love her. Now those memories felt like cruel illusions, mocking her in the darkness. Her pillow was damp more often than not, her body curling into itself as though to shield her from the edges of being unwanted. And then became the family gatherings where relatives would comment with his false smile. Ah, Minhee, you must be so happy. Jungkook is such a husband, isn't he? She would nod for a smile and say, yes, I'm grateful. But behind her smile, her heart screamed. She wanted to shout the truth, to tell them how cold he was, how alone she felt, yet she couldn't. Protecting his bride, even when he had shattered hers, was the only love she could still offer. The distance between them grew not only in private but in the eyes of the world. And Minhee, though she endured with grace, felt herself slowly drowning. It was during one of those suffocating weeks that Jaemin returned, Jungkook's younger brother. Absent for years while studying abroad, arrived mm, without much ceremony, his suitcase in hand and his smile as bright as the sunlight he carried with him. Minnie was in the hallway when she saw him for the first time. She bowed politely, her voice soft. Welcome home, Jaemin. He paused, studying her with curiosity. He had heard of her, of course, his brother's new bride, but the woman before him was not glowing bride he had imagined from the wedding picture. Her eyes were dim, her face pale, her smile forced. Something inside him stirred uneasily. Thank you, sister in law, he said warmly, his tone gentle, respectful. It's good to finally meet you. The word sister in law nearly broke her. It was the first time anyone had called her with kindness. She lowered her gaze quickly to hide the tears threatening to rise. At dinner that evening, Jaemin, think, Jaemin noticed things others ignored. He saw how Jungkook never looked at her, how he pushed aside the dish she had prepared, how he addressed the servants but not her. He saw her sitting quietly, her hands folded in her lap, trying to make herself invisible. After the meal, when she began clearing the table, Jamin followed her into the kitchen. You shouldn't do these things alone, he said, rolling up his sleeves. Her eyes widened. No, please, it's my duty. You are a guest. I am family, he interrupted gently, and family helps. For a moment, she didn't know what to say. No one had ever spoken to her like that in this house. She simply nodded, her heart trembling with a mixture of gratitude and sorrow. That night, as she carried a tray back to her room, Jamin noticed the weariness in her steps. He thought of the rumors he had overheard on his way home about the loveless marriage, and his jaw tightened. He didn't want to believe his brother capable of such cruelty, but the evidence was before his eyes. In the days that followed, Jamin's quiet kindness became a thread of light in his dark world. He never overstepped, but in small ways he reminded her she wasn't invisible. When he found her in the garden one morning, shivering in the early breeze, he draped his jacket over her shoulder without a word. She startled, then smiled faintly, whispering, "Thank you." Another evening, when she skipped dinner after a particularly cruel exchange with Jungkook, Jaemin knocked on her door. He stood there holding a tray with warm food. "You will fall sick if you don't eat," he said softly. She hesitated, her pride battling with her hunger, but the gentleness in his eyes melted her resistance. She accepted the tray with trembling hands. "You are too kind," she whispered. "It's not kindness," he replied. "It's what you deserve." Sometimes he asked simple questions. "Are you feeling well? Did you rest last night?" Questions so ordinary, yet they felt extraordinary to her because no one else bothered to ask. He listened when she spoke, even if her answers were brief. He laughed when she tried to lighten the mood, even though her laughter always carried a hint of sadness. For the first time since their marriage, Minnie felt seen, not as a burden, not as a daughter, but as a person. And all of this was noticed by Jungkook. And though Jungkook told himself he didn't care, that Minhee comfort meant nothing to him. Something dark twisted in his chest. He had vowed to make her suffer, and yet his own brother's presence threatened that vow. Watching Jaemin treat her with respect only highlighted his own cruelty, and though he wouldn't admit it, a flicker of guilt began to grab at him. But for many, Jaemin's kindness was not a spark of rebellion against Jungkook. It was simply a lifeline. She held on it quietly, not to defy her husband, but to survive him. She still loved Jungkook, still prayed one day he would believe her. But until then, Jaemin's gentle presence reminded her she wasn't completely alone in her suffering. The house had been unusually warm since Jaemin returned. His presence was like sunlight breaking into the rooms that had long shrouded in cold shadows. Minnie found herself less suffocated, less invisible. She still bore the weight of Jungkook's indifference, but Jaemin's small act of kindness gave her the strength to breathe. One afternoon, she sat in the courtyard, carefully trimming the withering petals from the roses that she had tended in her own presence. Her hands, though delicate, moved with practiced care, as though nursing each flower was her silent rebellion against the emptiness in her heart. Do they always bloom this beautifully when you care for them? Jamin's voice broke the quiet. She looked up, startled, but smiling faintly. Perhaps they respond to kindness. Even flowers need to be seen. Her words were simple, but the way she spoke them made Jamin's chest tighten. He crouched beside her, brushing away a fallen petal. Then they are lucky you are here. She laughed softly, a fragile sound, like glass chimes in the wind. It was the first genuine laugh she had allowed herself in weeks, and that was the moment when Jungkook saw them. He had come to the courtyard silently, intending only to pass only to pass through, but his steps froze when his eyes fell on the scene. Minnie, her face alight with a smile he hadn't seen since their wedding day, and Jamin watching her with warmth. A strange sensation gripped Jungkook's chest. It was sharp, uninviting, unsettling. He told himself it was nothing, yet his fist clenched at his sides. Why did it matter that she was smiling? Why did it bother him that she was smiling at Jamin? She had never smiled like that to him. Not anymore. The image burned in his mind long after he felt the courtyard. He sat in his study, glass of whiskey untouched, staring blankly at the wall. For the first time, her laughter haunted him, not because it was absent, but because he had been offered to someone else. That night, he avoided the dining table altogether. He couldn't bear the thought of watching them share and smiles and their looks, yet avoidance did nothing to quiet the storm building inside. Days passed, and Jungkook found himself noticing things she had never cared for before. At breakfast, he saw how Minhee poured Jaemin tea with a natural smile. She did the same for him, but he barely looked at her cup. Still, seeing her smile for Jaemin made something twist inside him. In the evening, when Jaemin returned from his errand, Minnie would say, "Did you eat?" Her tone was soft, caring. Jungkook had heard those words from her countless times, yet he had dismissed them as meaningless. But when she spoke them to Jaemin, Jungkook's jaw tightened. One afternoon, passing the library, he paused at the doorway. Inside, Jaemin stood by the shelves, while Minnie pointed at a book. Her face was bright with a quiet excitement. Hope you guys liked the video. Thank you so much for watching. And for videos like those, please like, subscribe, and share. And tell me in comment section what changes do you want in this video. And that's it for bye bye. See you soon.